Even after you have found information on your topic, you will still be faced with decisions to make about what information is credible and what information might not be credible. There are several criteria you can use to help determine whether a piece of information is appropriate to use in a college-level research paper. We will start by discussing several criteria that need to be evaluated for every type of information, whether it be a book, a website, or an article. We will then discuss a few specific things to look at for each individual information format. For our purposes today, we are going to look at sources that are discussing ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. First is the author. Who is the author of this information? Why does that matter? Let's look at a couple of different authors and see what differences we can find. Our first author is a man by the name of Joel T. Nigg. He has written a book called What Causes ADHD, Understanding What Goes Wrong and Why. If we put Mr. Nigg's name into Google or another internet search engine, we should be able to see what qualifies him to write on the topic of ADHD. When we do a search for Joel T. Nigg in Google, we get several results. The first result is a link to Mr. Nigg's professional information. When we view this page, we see some helpful information. First, we see that Mr. Nigg holds a PhD. We don't know in what subject area he studied at this point, but this is a good sign. We will now click on the top link of this page and see what other information we can find about our author. Now we can see that Dr. Nigg is a professor of clinical psychology. We can also see that he has a history of researching ADHD. Because of these indicators, we can easily conclude that Dr. Nigg is an expert in the field of ADHD, and his publishings can be considered acceptable for use in a research paper. Now let's look at another author. Robert DeMare is writing on the topic of ADHD as well. He has written a book called Dr. Bob's Guide to Stop ADHD in 18 Days. If we do a Google search for Robert DeMare, we get several results, but nothing that looks like it will help us understand who this author is or what credentials he has. However, if we do a search for Robert DeMare, drugless doctor, as he refers to himself in the book, we will get results that will help us understand Dr. DeMare's qualifications. When we click the About Us section of the Drugless Doctor homepage, we can see some information about Dr. Bob. But what this information omits is why he is qualified to write on this topic. In fact, there's no explanation on the website at all that tells us what Mr. DeMare's educational experience is or why he is an authority on ADHD. If we look in the book, in the About the Author section, we find that Dr. DeMare is a chiropractor. Does this mean that Dr. Bob doesn't know what he's talking about? Not necessarily. Does it mean we could probably find information on this topic written by someone that is more of an authority on the topic? Probably. Why is the author's educational and professional background important? It's becoming easier and easier to publish information. An author of any educational or professional background can easily publish on the internet. There are no restrictions on the authority a person must have to do this. Likewise, it is constantly becoming easier for a person to publish books. If an author is unable to find a publisher for their book, it is now relatively easy for an author to publish the books themselves. The second item to look at is the audience. The material is targeting. Does it make a difference who the target audience of a piece of information is? Imagine you are a teacher in your ward or branch, and you are assigned a topic is to teach the class about Ammon and his brother's mission to the Lamanites. What level of detail and description would you go into if you were teaching a gospel doctrine class? You might describe Ammon and his brother's background as Alma the Younger. You would probably talk about how their father was not exactly excited to send them out among the Lamanites. You would probably talk about their great desire to serve. You might talk about how each of them declined to be the king of the land of Zarahemla, and then you would talk about the experiences they had with the people of Lamoni, including when Ammon defended the king's flock at the waters of Sebus. The conversion of Lamoni and his people will certainly be part of this discussion, along with several other items. Now, imagine you are assigned to teach the 12-year-olds in your ward the same topic. Would your discussion be the same, or would you leave out some of the details and focus on others? What if we were teaching the CPR 5 class in your ward? Would the discussion be as in-depth? Would the discussion be led in a different direction? Would the focus be the same? Like church discussions, academic discussions can take on different levels of depth or detail based on the audience the discussion is directed at. If professionals are speaking to other professionals or to students of a specific discipline, the language and depth of the discussion will be at a very high level. If the discussion is between an academic and a non-academic, the discussion might change and important points of information would be omitted from the descriptions. When we are doing research projects for academic use, we want to include the discussion from the scholars to other scholars. This will ensure that we are including all important information that is available, and that we're not getting a filtered or diluted view of the topic we are researching. Another thing to do in the evaluation process is to determine when the information was created. Some topics will need to have very recent information to correctly represent the most current information available. Most scientific and technological topics will fall into this category. Can you imagine writing a research paper on the current techniques of organ transplantation and using a source from 1980? Things change rapidly in many areas. Because of this, it is important to find and use current information when doing research in areas where information is constantly being updated. Other topics can be adequately addressed using information published many years ago. If you are researching on the Civil War, it is probable that an article published in 1908 would be just as valuable as an article or book published just last year. The last piece of information that should be evaluated in every resource you find is whether or not the material has any cited references associated with it. These cited references, or bibliographies, show us that the authors of our work have reviewed previous research prior to completing their own publication. This can assure us that the ideas they've presented are not strictly their own, but have a basis in the scholarly world. Be sure to make certain the sources the article is cited are academic sources, not from popular materials. These cited sources should come from the same type of resources that you would use in your research. Each of these evaluation strategies should be completed on every resource you find for your research project, whether they be books, articles, or websites. This will be a start, but each resource has other evaluation techniques that also need to be completed. First, let's discuss what other criteria we can use when evaluating books. Sometimes you can tell a lot about a book by identifying the company that published it. However, you should probably never disqualify a book based solely on its publisher. There are several large publishing companies, such as Guilford, Josie Bass, Macmillan, and many others. If the book you are evaluating comes from one of these large publishers, it can help you to know that it is a scholarly book, but it does not necessarily mean it is academic. Likewise, there are many small publishing companies that publish very few materials. Just because the book is published by an obscure press doesn't mean it can't be valuable. If you are having a hard time deciding whether or not a certain book is scholarly, sometimes seeing who the publisher is can help you in your evaluation. Next, we will look at additional evaluation criteria for printed articles. Some article types will always be acceptable for use in research. Others should never be used in a research project, and still others have a place in some projects, but not in others. Let's first look at the types of articles that should be avoided when doing research. The first is a review. Book reviews are very common in the research databases that are available to use in libraries. Though not as common, another type of article that is not acceptable for use in a research paper are summaries of articles. These types of articles are only a sampling of the information that is presented in the entire work. If a book review seems to have relevant information, it would be far more appropriate to locate the entire book and reference that when writing a research paper. Similarly, article summaries are only summaries of the entire article. These summaries can be published in publications other than where the original article is published. It is much more acceptable to find the original article and use that as a source in your project. These original or complete works are usually known as primary sources. Primary sources are the equivalent of receiving information firsthand or from the source. When you receive information from a primary source, you have the complete context and discussion as it was intended by the author. When we receive information from a source other than the original source, the possibility of misinterpretation or misrepresentation by that second source occurs. We should always try and get primary source information when doing our research, if it's available. Just as there are types of articles that should never be used in research, there is a type of article that would always be suitable to use in a research project. This is a peer-reviewed article. The peer-reviewed article goes through a very extensive review process before it is published. These articles must be evaluated by experts in the article's subject area. Only after these experts have evaluated the research content and conclusions is the article published. Once the article has been